Welcome to Upstream, a source of ideas and encouragement for courageous bishops, pastors, priests, seminarians, and the people who support and work with them, all of whom are swimming against the currents of an increasingly hostile worldly culture to bring Jesus to that world. I'm your host, Pat Lencioni. Today, I've got my buddy and guest host, Chris Stefanick, with me. Chris, what's our topic today?
Maximizing the Mass.
That's right. This is going to be a potentially controversial topic, but there's nothing controversial about it because the Mass in and of itself is so amazing and so powerful. But we're going to talk about how we make sure we don't get in the way of that. Yeah. And to make sure that there's nothing controversial here, because we are fully about the liturgy and about the Mass and not changing that, we have a guest, Father Sean Conroy from Our Lady of Lourdes in Denver, who we are going to turn to like on a football game. You go to the referee in the studio and say, hey, is that the right call? So Father Sean, thank you for being with us today.
I love it. Thank you for having me.
And we're going to turn to you and you're going to interrupt us whenever you want to and go, no, you can't do that. Because we want to do this conversation and we always want the Mass to be the way it is meant to be. But there's a lot of things that Chris and I are going to talk about as lay people that we don't understand. And we want to figure out why we do those things, and do we really have to? Because the premise of this whole thing is the Mass is so powerful, and oftentimes I think there's things that happen at Mass that are actually a deterrent to us experiencing the power of it, and we want to flesh that out today for all of these wonderful priests that say Mass, and see if we might be able to come up with some ideas for how to make sure we are accessing the fullness of the Mass. You think you can do that, Father Sean?
That sounds terrific to me. I would agree. I think praying the Mass is always a great gift. There's always so many distractions that can happen, with crying babies or whatever. But when you fall in love with the Mass and you fall in love with Jesus, it doesn't matter what happens at Mass, what kind of music there is, what kind of this, how great the homily is. It's you are encountering the King of the universe there every time in the Eucharist.
That's right. And Chris and I literally, both of us, we didn't plan this, just got out of Mass. And we were at daily Mass today. And Father, my guess is, because you are a priest, that you said Mass today.
I did.
Yes. So we are fresh. We are fresh here. This is not something theoretical. So I want to start, Chris, by saying something that really should not be controversial. But it's this. I love going to daily Mass. Sunday Masses are a struggle for me for a variety of reasons. Okay. And I used to think like, what's wrong with me? This is heresy, what I'm saying. But I've talked to so many other people who say the same thing. And they're men and women, by the way, but a lot of men say the same thing. And that is this. When we go to Sunday Mass, there are so many things that happen there that slow everything down, that are distracting, that often are not excellent, and they make us lose sight of why we are there. And like, I just went to daily Mass and it was so powerful. And here's what was amazing about it. There was no singing except the woman who did the reading on the Psalms before Father came up. She sang the Alleluia. Everybody sang, not particularly well, but it was beautiful. Then Father actually had us sing the Our Father, and it was everybody sang. And then we sang the Lamb of God in Latin. And it was more singing than the Masses I go to on Sunday, where there's lots of songs and people just kind of stare at the choir and don't really know what's going on. And so that was so interesting to me. I thought, here I was at daily Mass and I sang louder and I felt like the music was powerful, but it was not overly produced. And that's kind of the thing I want to talk about today is, why do we overproduce Sunday Mass in a way that I think often distracts us from the power of the Mass? Does that make sense to you, Chris?
Yeah, it totally does. I have a relative who, this is not something I would ever endorse, but they did Catholicism on their terms. And she told me, I stopped going to Sunday Mass. I go on Monday. I'm thinking, okay, that's definitely breaking one of the commandments. But I'm like, why? She's like, well, I just don't want all the extra stuff. I just want it simple, and I want to pray, and I want to. Yeah, I just want to get to the point. I've been to Masses, obviously, where the long homily and beautiful music really draw me in. But then I've been to, this is an extreme, right? and I've never actually seen this, but the mass where there's a beach volleyball going around during the epiclesis or the or the first reading, and that kind of the clown experience is the utter opposite extreme. And there's a law of diminishing returns that applies in the business world, or applies if you're planting seeds in a field. Well, if I put X amount of seeds in this one little spot, will I get more fruit? No, actually, you're wasting seeds at a certain point. So I think there's the presumption that if we do more and more stuff and do it better and better, we're going to hook people in more effectively. And sometimes what people want is a space to cool their heads. There's enough noise in our lives, man, and kind of keep it simple.
And I will tell you, and Father, I appreciate your restraint, because Chris said it himself. We are not saying go to daily mass and not Sunday mass. Sunday mass is the commandment, and for good reason, which is why I'm so fired up about this, because I actually think inadvertently, for a variety of reasons that we're going to talk about today, including not wanting to have hard conversations, we allow things to happen at Sunday mass that is of no attraction or benefit, but we feel like we're supposed to do it because it's always been that way, and we actually make Sunday mass harder. Now, let me tell you who I'm thinking about here, Chris and Father. I'm thinking about myself. So I go to daily mass a lot. I've been a Catholic my whole life. This is not just me, but it does apply to me. But I think about my kids. Okay, I have 4 sons, and I've taken them to mass their whole lives, but now their ages 18 to 26, and it still applies to them. It even applies to non-Catholics or people considering being Catholic or fallen away Catholics. And when I'm working with or talking to a non-Catholic or a fallen away Catholic, I am much more likely to invite them to daily mass than to Sunday mass. When I invite them to daily mass, I brought a guy who had never been to a mass before, and he walked out of daily mass and said that was powerful, that was true worship, and he understood the power of it. If I brought him to Sunday mass, I think what he would say is that was a very bad version of a Protestant service. And I think there's something about that where we're trying to do what evangelical or Protestant churches do, and we're missing the fact that the Eucharist and the power of the liturgy and the words themselves are so powerful. And when we cover them up with a bunch of other things, I think we actually diminish the power of that. Father, I'm going to let you jump in. Does that make any sense to you?
I love it. I think you're absolutely right. And I think it's the tension of I think the church gets in really bad territory when the church tries to say, how can we look more like the world? The church is not supposed to look like the world. In fact, church in Greek, right? Ekklesia literally means to be called out of. We're called out of the world into a community. We're not supposed to look like the world. And there's this temptation, and I don't know, Chris, you probably think about it as well with regards to youth ministry when you used to do some of that, of we try to compete with entertaining the kids, and we're never going to out-entertain the kids compared to the world. We're never going to out-entertain compared to the Protestants. They're going to blow us out of the water with regards to having a coffee shop in their narthex so that you get your coffee, you go into the service, and then you enter in and you have, a rock concert or whatever. I think there has to be some sort of, okay, we recognize the culture is a bridge. We have to bring people in through a certain bridge, but we also have to make it accessible to them in a way that says, no, we're leading you to Christ the King. And this is meant to be a transcendent experience.
Yes, and that's not to say that if there aren't some things that we can do that are acceptable within the confines of the Mass and that do really enhance the experience for people that come. But so often we think we're enhancing it and we are not. We are blurring it. And so this is not to say really great music can be fantastic. But let's make sure it's really great and that it's elevating people to what the Mass is about, not making them think, well, it's kind of nice that I'm at a partial rock concert and now what's this other thing going on? Because that's not what it's meant to be. Chris, you were going to say something.
Yeah, and I think we, in the Catholic world, tend to think that evangelicals are doing the evangelitainment better. And a lot of times now, because it's so accessible to people's phones, even they're getting blown out of the water by the secular world, and they're not keeping up with the competition. And I think this is about leaning into our competitive advantage as we prepare and as you try to make it excellent, because we're not saying don't make it excellent for us. And that's not about making it short. have music, have as long a homily as is needed. But what are we leaning into as our competitive advantage? And I think you hit the nail on the head to be called out of. I want to be ripped out of my life as it is, as a layman who's busy, and every priest can relate. You got so much going on. And this is where I'm taken out of the story of my life and then put into God's story and then reinserted into my story, and I'm changed. That's the narrative arc of every great novel, right?
Yes.
That's what happens to the hero.
And I should say to everybody listening to this, I do a lot of work with and know a lot of people in the evangelical world, beautiful, wonderful brothers and sisters in Christ. I'm going to tell you something. They are so drawn to the Mass right now, to the beauty of the Mass, what that makes it different. And I won't use his name, but one of the most prominent evangelical preachers in the world is considering becoming Catholic. And he said that the Eucharist and the altar being the centerpiece, not the pulpit, and it's not about the fluff, it's about the truth, the early church and what Jesus instituted there. And that's what this podcast is about today. It's about how do we make sure we're doing nothing to blur that for people. And as a lifelong Catholic, I can tell you, when I take my kids to a daily Mass, I think they get it better. When they go to the Sunday Mass, they're looking around, they're waiting, it's slow, there's all kinds of distractions. And when I bring non-Catholics or considering Catholics to Mass, I have a woman that I work with whose kids are Catholic, her husband's Catholic. She's not yet. But when we travel, she will actually find a Mass and she and I will go to daily Mass. To listen to her talk about the power of what she sees there. And you know what she's really reacting to? Is the priest really on fire for Jesus? When he's doing when transubstantiation is occurring during the consecration, is his heart there? And are his words powerful? And is he praying? She's looking for that depth of experience. And the world is looking for this too. And I think sometimes we Catholics have been led to believe, or in the last 10 or 20 years, that what we need to do is look more like those other churches. But those other churches are doing something totally different. Those are fellowship experiences. Those are music, and that's great. But it's not a Mass, and they are looking for the Mass. And that's why we're talking about this today.
Yeah, just a thought, Pat, as well. I would be curious to know what you mean by slow when, these people come to Mass and it just feels slow. Because part of me actually thinks like daily Mass has like a nice slower rhythm of like, okay, there's not all like the music and the smells and bells. But I will say, like on Sunday Mass, like I personally, as a priest, as the presider, intentionally go slow in the sense of like, when it's the right time to pause, it's the right time to pause. When I say, let us pray, before just jumping right into the prayer, take, 5 seconds, 10 seconds just to pause and go slow. When I'm walking around the altar with the incense, to methodically do it. And so I would just be curious to know like what distractions and like what kind of slowness are you talking about there?
I'm glad you asked that question. And what Chris said before was right. And that is that it's not about Mass being shorter. It's about there being less times when you're not following. And the priest praying slowly is actually very compelling because it's like, what is he doing there? He is honoring this moment, or we're praying. Today, after the gospel, the priest said, let's spend a few minutes in silent prayer. That's not slow. What's slow is when we're singing a song that nobody's actually singing, and we're waiting for Mass to continue, and people are looking around, they're looking at their phones, and they're waiting, and they're distracted by what's happening in the choir loft or in the place up near the altar, and we've lost the sense that we're at Mass, and we think we're at a recital, and that's one of the things. Chris, what were we going to say?
I'd also say what gets slow is things that I think a lot of pastors feel pressured by every group in their parish to add into the Mass. I was at a Mass once, and it was beautiful people that got up and did this prayer of consecration they prepared for 30 days before the Mass. And it was very special for them and had zero relevance for the other 1,000. And that should have happened as a private devotional. I'd also say this, pauses are wonderful. If the prayer comes out really slow, this is just totally personal. I have a very ADHD brain that moves very fast. I probably think in 500 words per minute. If the prayer comes out that slow, I can't follow. My wife is great at following, but my brain has raced to the end of the prayer already, and you're gone. Anyway, those are some random thoughts.
and err on the side of the people who think quickly. I mean, I'm a public speaker, for instance. Yeah. Having people say, hey, I'd like you to slow down is so much better, because then they're like, hey, I like this. But when people go slowly, whether it's a teacher in a class or a professor in college or a priest giving a homily, when people are thinking, oh, this is so slow, they've lost it. When people are like, oh my gosh, this is interesting, slow down a little bit, then they're going like, oh, I want more. And so when it comes to speaking, err on the side of keeping things moving and keeping people's attention. But that's not about prayers. That's not about the actual, the consecration and things like that. I wouldn't dare suggest like, come on, race through that. So it's a little bit different. Let's go through the Mass right now and talk about a few ways that we could make Mass even more powerful. And again, no heresy there, because the Mass, the source and summit of our faith. But if there's a few things we could do, and Father, Chris and I are going to talk about this, and we want you to dive in and throw a flag and go, nope, you can't do that. Here's one of them. Let's start at the beginning of Mass, and talk about the readings. And I'm not going to say that people that can't read the readings, that's okay. We got to start realizing they're proclaiming from the Bible. And we got to have people that are trained in it or good in it and that can understand it. So that's easy. Everybody hears complaints about that.
You're not reading, you're proclaiming. There's a key distinction in terms. And if they know it, you feel that.
Yeah. Here's the other thing. 98%, and trust me, I'm right about this. 98% of people in the church don't understand the context of the readings. And we go, okay, we're going to read from Acts of the Apostles. And then they read it. And Father, you're going to have to tell me if this is okay. I don't know why Father doesn't go, hey, everybody, really quickly, what's happening right here is that St. Stephen, right after Jesus died, he is the first martyr. So what you're about to hear is the first guy who died proclaiming the faith. So as you hear this, think about that. Or, hey, when Paul's writing this letter, he's in prison. And it's probably not very long before he dies. So this is one of the last things he writes. And the guy he's writing to, Timothy was his friend and who he brought on, whatever it is. I don't know why 30 seconds of context would make everybody sit up and go, ooh, this is interesting. Mm-hmm. But what we do is we have somebody read through the thing. And I look at the kids, I look at my wife, I look at the other people in Mass, and they're just like, I don't know what that was. Mm-hmm. Or the Psalms. Like, hey, here's what we believe David wrote the Psalms, and this Psalm is about this. So as he says this, I want you to realize David is in anguish or he's in joy. Is there something that prevents a priest from being able to do that, Father?
There's not actually, no. So it's actually in the germ that's permissible. It's allowed. There's a priest in my diocese who's actually now at my home parish, Father John Paul, who does this on some Sundays. I don't know if he still does it every Sunday or what, but right as exactly as you were saying, right before the reading, he gets up there and he says, hey, this is the context of this reading. Now listen in. I think I would be open to other priests doing it too, but I think the invitation that I always love to give to lay people is, can you read the readings before you come to Mass, right? Pray with it on Wednesday, and then when you come on Sunday, it will be a review, a newness, and that way you're not hearing it for the first time.
Well, and that will certainly help them pronounce the words better and everything. But I'm going to tell you this, even the people who read the readings don't know the context.
Yeah. And you'll get guys like me and Pat to do that, but most people won't do it.
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm going to be very bold right here and say this to every priest listening. I will challenge you to, why wouldn't you provide that context every single time somebody does a reading? Because if you knew that literally 80%, now I think I'm mellowing that out. I think it's 98%. If 80% of the people in the pews did not know what the difference between a Paul's letter, an epistle versus the Acts of the Apostles versus something from the Old Testament, if you knew that 80% of the people had no context and they were hearing a bunch of words and they didn't know where this fit into the good news, wouldn't you say, gosh, I should probably give them 30 seconds of instruction? So I'm going to say this. I really can't think of a reason not to do this every single time. How's that for bold, controversial? What do you think, Chris?
I thought that was awesome. I applaud it. And, that's an extra, but it's not an extra that takes away from the central focus. It's an extra that holds it up, that is about the Mass itself, which I think this is all about leaning back on, let the Mass do its job and what we can do to support that, not to turn the Mass into a stage for some other thing.
And I want to go a little further and say this. Do you know why this is so important? Because when I'm sitting there at Mass and I don't fully understand the context of it, I'm going to tell you, I feel like I'm a horrible parent because I don't even understand this. So I can't even explain it to my kids. But I know there's at least one person in this church who gets it. Does he think I understand what's going on here? And if so, then probably I'm a bad Catholic because I don't know. And this is from a guy who's pretty involved in the church and pretty involved in, biblical things. It's still a challenge for me. And so when I look at the people around me, and I know a lot of friends who go to Mass, they're like, I have no idea what that is.
Yeah. Can I jump in with another suggestion and idea? And this is based on stuff I see happening at Lourdes, which I love this, Father Sean. It is that pregnant pause. If you're at a symphony, if there's a pause in the music, you don't clap. You clap at the wrong place, you're an idiot. Everybody turns around and looks at you. The rest note is an actual note in the symphony. When we talk about having the Mass feel sacred and transporting me and getting me out of the world, that doesn't mean traditional Latin Mass or chant. Not that chant is a bad thing. Or if you like TLM, whatever, it's a whole other episode.
Yeah, that's fine.
What it means is that the people at the Mass are making it clear that this is sacred time, that we're serious, we're focused. And so that little pause before the reading happens, that little pause before the Eucharistic prayer, that deep breath, it focuses the whole congregation. I just want to thank you, Father Sean, Father Brian, Father Vital, for doing that. It shows me this is different than regular life.
And that's good because, again, we're not talking about just make it faster. Now, there's nothing wrong with making some things faster if they don't need to be slower. But that's not about get me out of Mass so I can get home and watch a football game. It's about keep me engaged in the spiritual nature of what I'm doing and don't let me wander.
Yeah. What are times that you pause? Can I ask that? What that you recommend a quick, just a couple seconds. It's all it takes, but it really helps me as a person in the congregation.
Yeah, I mean, they're built into the Mass, right? So the first one would be at the beginning, let us call to mind our sins. It's like, give a long pause there. And so often, if the deacon is there, sometimes the deacon will just be so quick to just be like, you were sent to heal the contrite of heart, Lord have mercy. And it's like, whoa. Like, let people have time to get into the Mass and then be able to reflect on my sins. And our Archbishop Aquila, he tends to give a really, really long pause there. And I've always admired that. And he's called us priests to do it. He said, say the Hail Mary to yourself very slowly if you want to know what a long pause is. That's one moment. I think in between each reading, you can have a different kind of pauses. But then there's also different moments in the Eucharistic prayer. And I think one of the things we always invite our music ministry team to think about too is just like, when is there going to be moments of silence when you're playing music? Usually we have 2 to 3 communion hymns. Sometimes there's just a good 10, 15 minutes of seconds of silence in there where it's just like, okay, don't go from song to song to song. Allow people to reflect. I love, after I'm done purifying, if there's no deacon, purifying all the vessels, I sit down and I allow people just to pray, with good 20 to I don't know, seconds to a minute of, hey, let's just have some silence. You just received Jesus, and just allow the silence to be a prayer itself.
So I love this because I am all in favor of that. Now, it doesn't matter if I'm in favor of it, if it's part of the Mass and it's supposed to be done, but that is not the part that I think is slow. Let me tell you, let me go through a few others. So, and I could be wrong about this. I actually struggle with, and I'm very careful to say this, the singing of the Gloria, only because it is one of the hardest things to sing for people in the audience in the pews. And I don't know what the good version of it is, but I know that I always lose. I start to wander until the last thing, and I'm like, oh gosh, I just missed the Gloria. And yet the times when there's no singing and we say it, I say every word and I'm thinking about what I'm saying. And oftentimes I find that saying a prayer versus singing it allows me to actually pray it. But I don't know if that's allowed, not allowed. I don't want to be, disrespectful. What do you think, Father?
It's allowed, right? So the Missal will say the Gloria can be said or sung. But I don't know if there's necessarily a church's preference. It's one of the oldest hymns in the church. I think it comes from the 4th century. Don't quote me on that, but it's one of the oldest hymns. And we always joke, us priests, we're like, when people show up late to Mass, we're like, just remember, the Gloria is not the opening hymn, right? It's a part of the Mass, but you could certainly say it. And I think there's a lot of leeway here especially for the seasons of Advent and Lent. How do we change it up and make it in a way that actually draw people in? Usually Lenten Advent is where we switch to the simple Latin chant tones, and people are they hear different tones. They're able to draw in, they hear the Latin, they're able to draw into a different way.
Now, let me say this, because this is really important. We were in Europe a couple years ago on vacation in London with our kids, and we went to Brompton Oratory. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's a beautiful church right in London. And it had a boys' choir, and they sang everything just about. My kids were like, that was cool. And what they meant was that was beautiful. They said that was mass. So I'm not against singing, but the current way we do the Gloria, I find that most of the people don't know the tune, and the choir isn't really great at it, and it really doesn't allow us to pray the words. So it's not that I'm against singing, but when in doubt, if the singing isn't something that people participate in, it feels like a net loss and a distraction.
I'm going to step out on a limb here and maybe get people angry, but there are some versions of the Gloria, and actually the most popular one I've heard, that is so sing-songy that it misses the spirit and power of the prayer entirely. This doesn't feel like glory to God in the highest, peace to, like there's a power and might, right. And it doesn't resonate with my spirit just as a man, to be honest with you. Do you feel that? I'm sorry. Like, if you like that one, I love you. I know friends who lead liturgy and who sing that one. God bless them, but I can't stand it.
No. But here's the deal, Chris. I will say this. This is not about preference.
Yeah.
This is about if people are singing it and it's bringing up, then I say all the power to you. This is not about my preference. What I know is this. No, I look around. Nobody is singing it. They're checking out. And then the last line comes and people go, oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Here we go again. So it's not about preference. Because we could have a whole podcast and argue about that. If it's getting people elevated and passionate about what they're saying, then good on them. But the thing is, when it's not, do we have to ask ourselves, there's something going on here, which brings me to a question for you, Father. This is a question so many lay people.
Well, I think he wanted to jump in on the Gloria question too.
No. This is too important. I got to say this. Father,
yes.
Do you notice when people are checking out?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Okay, you do.
And I do have a question for you guys, actually, because I'd love some feedback on this just in general from priests. Is like, I notice when people check out, especially during my homily. And then so if I get towards the end of my homily, I'm like, I got to land this plane and I got to land it quick because no one is with me right now. Or I have to lighten it up and tell a joke so I get people back with me. But you can so see, and like, there's nothing more depressing as a priest than when you look out and no one wants to be here. And I will say, this is the universal experience of priests on Saturday nights. You look out and you're just like, no one wants to be here right now.
Okay. I'm so glad you just said that, Father. This is a breakthrough. This is a massive breakthrough and most of the people listening to this are priests, but we just want you to know, we assume that you don't notice.
Yeah,
we assume you don't notice but we notice, and we're like, okay, we're not checked in. Maybe he doesn't notice that we're not checked in. And there's so many things that we could do. And that's what this very podcast is about. Because you know what I think would be awesome is if I always think, and this is the advice I give, now we're moving on to the homily.
Yeah.
Let them know that there's a person behind the person saying this. Like, go up there and just say, listen, hey, it's Saturday night. And so often on Saturday night, I think it's been a long day and people come to mass and I'm up here talking and I notice that people seem a little sleepy and it makes me feel like, man, I need to do a better job. So I'm about to talk about divine mercy and it's really important. And I just hope I say it to you in a way that allows you to understand it because it really is a difference maker in your life. Every person in church will go, oh, wow, he knows that I'm sleepy. And I think what we do is we go, let's not acknowledge that we're sleepy. You don't acknowledge that we're sleepy. Let's just all be sleepy. And it's painful for everyone. So be humble enough, or not humble enough, but be human and vulnerable enough to say, gosh, as I'm saying this, you guys, I'm wondering, is this getting through? Because this is so powerful. And I think people would go, way to go, Father.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I love, Pat, you talked a lot, like working genius, 5 dysfunction of a team, just a lot about like leading with vulnerability type of trust. And I love that of like, if the priest gets up there and just is vulnerable and shares his heart, like people are going to lock in and be like, I'm going to listen. I'm going to pay attention. My question for the two of you on homilies is just like, there's kind of two radical different views of priests with regards to homilies. You get, these are the two extremes. I think the ultimate is to find the middle. But one extreme would be, oh, people have to come here. People are here for the Eucharist anyway, so I don't really prepare. I don't need to prepare. They just want to be fed through the Eucharist, so I'm not going to do anything. The opposite extreme are the people who are just like, I'm going to preach for 45 minutes because it's the one day a week where people come, and who cares if Mass is 2 hours, because they're just going to go and watch Oprah for 2 hours anyways, or football for 2 hours. Like, those are the two opposite extremes. And so I'm wondering, and for priests as well, like, I don't always do the best job of this, but we don't get a lot of feedback on homilies. And so quite frankly, most priests don't know, am I a good preacher? Am I reaching people? And we want to know those things. We want to know, am I losing people? Am I engaging people?
We did another podcast on this series that people can find called The Unmentionable H Word, I think, which most people think is hell, but it's not. It's homilies, And
Love
so
it.
we really think there's a way to make them better. But here's the thing, and I say this with great love for my priest friends, pastors, bishops, everybody, and that is most daily masses I go to, the homily is really good. And you know why? It's not just about you. It's about we can remember it. Mm-hmm. And when you finish, we go, oh, that's the point. I got it. And I'm going to go, and if somebody said to me, when I come back to work sometimes after the daily mass, they go, what was the homily about? I'm going to say, it was about this. Most times after a Sunday homily, you get home, I'll say to my wife, if she didn't go to mass, or my son goes to a different mass, if they go to different times, well, what was the homily? And they're going, I don't know. And it's usually because we try to do too much. And I really do believe what we should do is we should say this: let's start thinking about our homilies the way we think about our daily mass homilies, like a single point that's very powerful. Now, if you can put a few more leaves on that tree, but please don't add more because you feel like you're supposed to, because all it does is it makes it harder for us to remember it and then practice it. I really feel that way.
I'd also say when it comes to everything we're discussing, whether a particular Gloria resonates with your congregation to how you're doing your homily, let what you're seeing in your congregation inform you. If no one's singing that Gloria, stop. Switch it the next week. If you're preaching, you're going to notice and this is how I've gotten good, and Pat's gotten good through the years at speaking. It's having the humility to be a student of the people you're talking to. They're going to tell you with their eyes when you're losing them, and you're going to refine it next week. And the great thing is that you guys get to refine it constantly. And Father Sean, one of the great honors that you gave me as one of your parishioners, you sent me a homily and asked me for my input. If you got 5 people in your parish, and most priests don't know what their people are thinking about their homiletic skills, or if they're hitting the mark, because they don't ask. If you got 3 to 5 people that you trust, or maybe 2 people you trust, we'd be honored to give you input every week, honestly. And that feedback helps you get so much better. I love when people rip into my talks. It helps me so much.
Yeah. Here's another thing. If you know that you struggle with something in your speaking, let people know that regularly. Like, hey, I'm Father Fred, and I tend to jump around. I know that sometimes I'll skip to this thing and I'll skip to this thing. And so if you're having a hard time following me, just know that I get it, and I'm going to try. And if you want to let me, you know what I mean? It's like, let them know that you're aware of that, or say, gosh, I wish I could be more like this, so I'm going to try this when I'm speaking. They're going to be rooting for you.
Totally.
As opposed to evaluating you. And when they're rooting for you, they're looking for the message from you.
That's beautiful. And Pat, when you and me go into a place, crowds are merciless because, we're in front of them for 1 hour and then we're gone. Priests, like, it's hard to give a new thing every week. Yet the plus that's going in your favor is you're our Father. We call you Father. Like, we're on your team, and you can have a next level kind of vulnerability that's just incredible.
Right. Gosh, there's a priest, a dear friend of mine, and he asked me for help with his homily, and he jumps around. I mean, he wanders, and it drives me crazy, and he's a friend of mine. So I'm not mad at him for it, but I know my kids are lost. We're all lost. And I really think at the end of his homilies, he should just go, well, I think I wandered around there, and if we're going to land this plane, I hope that you got here's the 2 main points I made, and I'm sorry, next time I'll try to be a little bit more focused. We would all be like, good on you, Father.
Yeah.
So anyway, homilies, start with daily mass and say, if I can make 1 point that people remember and leave, they will say that is a better homily. You know what that old saying that I'm sorry this letter is so short, so long, I didn't have time to make it shorter. Longer does not make for a better homily. It just doesn't. Okay. So what other things could we do? And let me make another analogy if I could right here, because I want to really put this point out there. If you have a beautiful painting, let's say you have the most beautiful painting in the world and you want people to experience it. And you said, come over to my house, I have this painting and I put it in this room. When I walk into that room, if I've painted the room crazy colors and I put in a bunch of other things and I've put a bunch of other things about the painting, all it does is detract from the painting itself. Mm. But if I walk into that room and there's 2 lights on this painting and everything else is very simple, the fullness of the painting is what I look at. And so what we're really talking about here, is there anything going on at Mass that is not elevating the Mass? And so that's the spirit of this. So is there anything else we can think of that might be distracting from the power of what we're doing? What do you think, Chris?
Well, playing off what you just said, when there's 5 homilies, when there should be one that can distract me, because frankly, after the homily, we're supposed to transition to the Eucharistic prayer, and my head's jumbled. Right. It's like I can't think straight anymore. Hopefully I come back by the time of the epiclesis. That's another one that pops in my head. Father Sean, what are you thinking?
I think to maximize the Mass, I just love the title of this podcast of it's not just what we can get out of it as participants, but we maximize the Mass when the priest prays it well. And so encouragements there's a big difference in the priest's heart when I walk into the sacristy 2 minutes before Mass versus when I get there 10 minutes early, can pray the vesting prayers, put on your alb, put on everything, put on the chasuble, and realize I'm about to go to the most important part of my day.
And participate in a miracle.
Exactly. And this is the daily sacrifice. This is so important. And when I go in with a good mindset like that, it just changes everything. If I pray the Mass well, people are going to pray it well. And yes, there's still the ex opere operato, the sacrifice happens whether I'm in a good state or not. But if the holier the minister becomes, the more grace that the recipient can actually receive if they're disposed to it, which is so powerful. And so I think being disposed, being preparing in a way that says, I care about this and I love my parishioners and I want to make this a special experience, a transcendent experience for them.
And we can tell as lay people if this is a part of your day or if you put in the right mindset where it's the most important thing. And you just called me on this myself, Father Sean, so thanks for saying that. When I'm heading to Mass, it helps for me to tell myself, and I love Jesus, man, but there's so many times where this is still just fitting into my day. If I just pause for a minute and tell myself, there is literally nothing more important in my life than what I'm about to do, than what I'm about to participate in. Yeah, you can't fake that, honestly.
I would love it. The few times I've been to a teaching Mass, there's a few things about it that I love, but I would love it if right before the consecration that a priest stopped and would say, okay, by the way, we are about to bring Jesus. Jesus is going to be here. And this is, and I'm not, these are the wrong words, but what's about to happen is the source and summit of our faith and the most important thing we will experience in this week and in our lives. So let's prepare ourselves for the consecration. My kids would be like, whoa, because sometimes when we're racing through those words, and my whole life I've been thinking man, are these words, am I supposed to really be thinking about that? And when I go to Mass and I think about the words, everything changes. So thank you for all you priests out there. And the people listening to this podcast, they believe. They're celebrating the Mass with such profound, just know we notice and we appreciate it. When you are doing that, it is changing our understanding of what we're participating in, and we appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to all our priests. I know it can be frustrating, and it's hard to do things like this, and everybody has this general sense and sometimes an angst around, I want to do things better. You're sacrificing your very self at every Mass with the Lord. I'm very grateful.
And so this podcast is not a criticism. It's an encouragement that you could probably do less to make the Mass even better, to maximize it. Now, here's the last thing I would say, and I think we should end this, without going overboard. But my least favorite words in the world, but this is not something you can change, is please be seated for a few announcements. No, but in fact, that's not a holy problem I have. That's a bad. I should be glad for that, because that means we're going to talk about really good things that you can do to grow in your love for Jesus. But I thought with a little humor, please be seated for a few announcements. We're all like, oh man.
Well, it's not a Catholic Mass unless that's said.
That's right. That's
Mm,
right.
the
All
river.
right. So those are just some of the things. I think what we really want to say here today is this. If there's anything that doesn't have to be in Mass, that you don't get a sense that it's bringing people closer to Jesus, then probably less becomes more. But it's not because we want to get out of Mass faster. It's not because we're lazy. It's because we really want to experience the fullness of what's there. And a longer song or music that's not performed particularly well, or a homily that goes longer than it needs to be, give yourself a break and say, let's reduce this so that the power of it is even more accentuated. Make sense? Any final comments, Father, just to make sure that we don't get in trouble?
No, I think that's spot on. And I think, a lot of priests listen to this, and I think the encouragement, of course, is pray it well, and just the comments, some of them about TLM versus Novus Ordo, all that stuff. It's like, no, the Mass is the Mass. Right. I believe fully in the Novus Ordo. I love it. I love Vatican II. I love the universal call to holiness.
Amen.
And the Church has given us this ordinary means for the universal call to holiness. People are transformed through the Mass, through the sacraments. And the better that we come to know that and experience that, and then pray through the sacraments, pray the Mass, the more that the transmission of it will actually take effect in people's lives.
Father, you just reminded me of something. There's one word I want to add here, and it's never a good word it's performative. The Mass is not performative. It is powerful. And praying it well and praying it with fervor is not performative. Performative is what's making a lot of people in other churches, non-Catholic churches, because they sometimes when they feel like it's staged to be performative, I'm not saying they all are, but that's something the Catholic Church isn't and never should be and doesn't need to be. The Mass is so powerful. So a fervent prayer and passion, but not performative. And Amen. I think that's a beautiful thing. All righty, Chris, thank you for being here. Father, thank you for being here. We love comments from priests, and we love our priests, and we appreciate your vocation and your gift to the Church and to all of us and our families. So praise God for you, and we thank you for being with us. We'll talk to you next time.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, guys.
On Upstream. God bless you, Father.
Thanks, John.